Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder three. Strange things that happen here. How stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?
Welcome to Strange Things, broadcasting from the Arkanasa Radio Studios in Laredo, Texas. And welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. It's February 10th, 2018. Tonight we're going to be talking about some haunted places in and around the country. First off, I'd like to say howdy to all the folks who are now subscribers on YouTube. I'd run down the list, but the thing just doubled in size in just a few days. Let's just say you folks are why I do this show. If you have a story you'd like to hear more about or something you'd like to share, you can get with me at strangethings@arkanasa.com and send me your ideas. It might surprise some folks to hear about how many places around us hold some strange, otherworldly phenomena that can't be explained away. I've been to a few of these locations, and some have a downright eerie feel to them. My wife and I were coming back from Virginia one day about 3 years ago. We'd crossed into Texas, and were on I-30. It was getting late, and we'd been driving since Natchez Trace. My wife looked in our handy-dandy Texas State Parks guide and said that Cooper Lake was close, so we decided to spend the night there. Cooper Lake, like all lakes in Texas, with the exception of Caddo Lake, were built by men. Caddo is the only naturally formed lake in our state. We pulled in and had a choice to make. Cooper Lake Sulphur on the south side of the lake, or Cooper Lake Doctors Creek to the north. We chose the north side just by flipping a coin. As we pulled in to register, the sun was just about on the horizon. I paid for one night, and were given a spot way back in the trees by itself. We set up camp, and then we went for a little walk. As we strolled along the park road, we discovered we had the entire north end to ourselves. The only other campers were right down by the lake. This was a plus because, well, it'd make it quieter at night. Once the sun was down and we'd turned in for the night, I began to wonder about our location. It looked like something out of a horror movie. Two campers all alone in the dark. That sort of thing. Normally, I'd never lock the door to the RV. I just don't. We've gone for walks at some parks and left the door unlocked and never lost anything. RVing is more relaxing than staying in any hotel ever could be. Well, this night, I locked the door. I also pulled my pistol out of its holster and I set it next to the bed. I felt very uneasy, but I couldn't say why. I've discovered over the years, when your inner mind says to be ready, you should listen. In the morning, there was nothing amiss. Nobody had tried to open the door or steal our lawn chairs. What was it that had made me feel so odd? In November of last year, I interviewed Jerry Hestand about his experiences looking for Bigfoot. It turns out the area around Cooper Lake has had quite a few sightings. Now, I've heard from more than one person who had a run-in with the Sasquatch that during the experience, they were overcome by a feeling of intense dread. I've seen a ghost. It didn't scare me. I've had more than one weird encounter and never felt like I did that night in the state park. Was there something lurking in the dark that for some unknown reason was exuding an aura of nastiness and fear? I don't know, but for sure, But next time we go by Cooper Lake, I plan to do a little more investigating. If you drive north out of Odessa, Texas on State Road 385 for about 25 miles, you'll come to a small town named Andrews. It's the county seat of Andrews County. You keep going north for a few miles, and you'll come to FM 1967. Turn west and drive to Shafter Lake. The town was originally named Salt Lake because the water there was extremely salty. In 1875, the lake and the town were named Shafter after a Union officer, William Shafter. In 1910, the county held an election to choose the county seat. The Shafter wanted the government center in their town, but Andrews won the election, and folks living in Shafter began to move away. Today, the town is abandoned, and only the cemetery remains. Now, the lake has a weird habit of vanishing. If you go there right now, all you'll see is the dried-up remains of the lake bed. The town is nothing but one old ranch house built back in 1907. If you decide to stay a while and have a look around, you just might see a cavalry unit go strolling by. People have reported seeing men dressed in Civil War attire, mounted on horseback as they traveled across the area around the dry lake. It became a popular teen hangout, which then led to folks stealing tombstones. In an effort to protect the cemetery, the county removed most of the headstones. Today there are only about 12 stones left standing. Ghost activity has been associated with destruction or movement of graveyards. This might explain some of the sightings, but it wouldn't account for an army detail moving through the brush. What could have happened that caused this ghostly unit to continue riding through the area? This is what we would call a residual haunting. It's like a tape playing over and over. As far as we know, no one has ever had any kind of a response from the soldiers. Believe it or not, I'm not the only Chris James out there. Back when I was a paramedic, there were 3 other paramedics in Texas, all by the same name. Anytime I needed to check my records or file a report, I had to choose the right file or I'd wind up messing things up for somebody else. In Virginia, another Chris James, who has had some interesting experiences in the past, he once visited the Sensenbow Tunnel in East Tennessee. The tunnel is located off the Big Elm Road in Kingsport, Tennessee. The tunnel was constructed back in the 1920s, but today it's in pretty bad shape and there's graffiti sprayed all over the face of its walls. It is believed that the haunted nature of the tunnel is accredited to the tunnel being the site of several ghastly murders, a few odd deaths, and even satanic rituals. Some of the folks living near the tunnel warn visitors to stay away from the place. Odd things happen, and they don't want any more unexplained deaths in their neighborhood. Now, some people like to drive to the tunnel. They stop just short of the entrance and sprinkle baby powder all over the rear of their vehicle. Then it's time to drive partway through the tunnel and stop. If you turn the engine off and sit there for a few minutes, and then drive to the other end, you'll see handprints all over the back of your car. We're going to take a brief pause here, play a couple commercials, and drink some coffee. So don't go away. We'll be right back after this. You're listening to Arkanasa Radio. Do you have skin? Would you like to take better care of it? Call Lourdes James, independent beauty consultant, and set up an appointment. call 723-3019. Coffee, nectar of the gods. And at the Organic Man Coffee Trike, you'll find coffee made the right way, one delicious cup at a time. Stop on by 4501 McPherson, Suite number 9. And remember, life is too short to drink bad coffee. If your vision isn't what it used to be, and you're not sure you're seeing Bigfoot or just your neighbor mowing his lawn, stop on by Del Norte Optical, 107 Calle del Norte, just across the street from the Embassy Suites. You should be able to see what you're looking at. The following is an excerpt from the Laredo Paranormal Research Society. We don't all see the light. As reported by a second registered nurse. An old woman was approaching the end of her life. She was hospitalized, and there was little anyone could do for her. The nurses did their best to see to it she was as comfortable in her last days, checking on her more often than required. The nurse asked, "How are you doing tonight?" "Don't leave me. I don't want to die. Tell that person behind you to go away. I'm not ready." Looking over her shoulder, the nurse could see there was no one there. "Don't let him near me. Keep him out of my room." "What does he look like?" "He's covered with hair, and his eyes are glowing red." Unable to spend the entire shift with just one patient, the nurse had to continue her shift. At long last, her evening was done, and she passed the floor on to the next nurse. Returning to work the next evening, the nurse asked about the old woman. "Oh, well, she died early this morning. You should have seen it." "What? What happened?" "She was found in the morning laying in bed. She choked to death. Her tongue was hanging way out of her mouth, and it was covered with some black, nasty, smelly substance." "My God, I wonder what happened to her." "Didn't you know? She used to practice witchcraft. She was into very evil things." Did you hear a bump in the night and you think it just might be a ghost? Contact the Laredo Paranormal Research Society at laredoparanormal@hotmail.com. That's the LPRS for all your otherworldly needs. You're listening to Strange Things with Chris James. And welcome back to the show. We were just talking about the Sensenbow Tunnel in Tennessee. The original owners of the land the tunnel sits on was supposed to have murdered his entire family back in the 1930s or early 40s. He went as far as to murder one of the youngest children in the tunnel itself. This is the origins of the ghosts people see. A few other murders took place in and around the tunnel over the years. As for the Satanists, I couldn't find any report, but then a lot of weird activity never gets reported. First, the witness has to escape to live another day. Then, they have to be bold enough to actually go to the police and file a report that the local authorities have to take the witness seriously enough to write it up. The Satanists are attracted to areas with extreme energy or a history of nastiness. Case in point, Jack Parsons, the founder of the JPL and self-avowed Satanist, would insist on using certain locations for his experiments, using locations like the Devil's Gate, which held energy that he wanted to tap into. When Chris James visited the tunnel, he didn't get to see anything odd, but he did feel as if there was something there. I drive through Tennessee a lot, but I don't think my wife will want to go visit the tunnel. Chris also stayed at the historic Hotel Alex Johnson in Rapid City, South Dakota. This hotel is known as one of the most haunted hotels in South Dakota. The Alex Johnson was visited by the ghost hunters from the Sci-Fi Channel. Jason and Grant took their ghost hunting dog, Maddie, to see if she'd pick up on anything. The ghost hunting dog decided she didn't much like some of the rooms. Having had a few dogs over the years, I've found they can sense things around us that we don't know are there. Whenever Maddie didn't want to enter a part of the hotel, Jason would receive some high EMF readings on his K2 meter. If you want to see parts of the episode, go to YouTube and search for Ghost Hunters Alex Johnson Hotel. The investigators reported that they experienced significant paranormal activity throughout the hotel. The most popular ghost story of the Hotel Alex Johnson is that the Lady in White. During the 1970s, a young bride committed suicide by jumping out the window of room 812. Some folks say she didn't jump, but she was thrown. This might have been a murder instead of a suicide. She died after her wedding, and she had just inherited a large sum of money. The investigation never found any signs of foul play, and the death was ruled as a suicide. Chris James had mentioned to the desk clerk how his son, who was 12 or 13 at the time, just loved ghosts. The clerk let them into the ballroom to have a look around. Chris's son saw several orbs drifting around, but he couldn't get any photos of them. That night they stayed in the room just upstairs from where the woman had either jumped or been pushed. Chris wanted to get the actual room, but his wife had other ideas. She was not going to stay in a room where somebody had died. People who do stay in room 812 find that the window is open in the morning, and all the dresser drawers have been taken out, turned upside down, and put back in. Guests see the young bride wandering the halls of the 8th floor. She is still in her wedding gown and seems to be looking for something, either her long-lost lover or perhaps those responsible for her death. Some guests have had someone knocking at the room door. When they answer it, there's a young girl standing in the hallway. As they look at this girl, she giggles and then vanishes. Others say they hear the girl laughing in the hallway, but they never catch sight of her. Rather than ignore these reports, the management has embraced the ghost sightings. If you're ever in Rapid City, South Dakota, you can book a ghost package. You get to spend the night in a haunted hotel room, and they loan you a K2 meter so you can figure out if you're alone or not. For more on the hotel, go to alexjohnson.com/about and /hauntings. Everybody knows the old saying, "Remember the Alamo," which was the war cry of the Texas Army back in 1836, right up until the Battle of the San Jacinto. Well, most people have gotten it wrong. The original saying was, "Remember the Alamo, remember Goliad." On October 9th, 1835, the Texas Army attacked the Mexican soldiers stationed at Presidio La Bahia in Goliad, Texas. One Texas soldier was injured, and maybe 3 Mexican soldiers were killed. Not a very big battle. The Texas Army took over the fortifications at the Presidio, and they renamed it Fort Defiance. Well, Santa Anna got a little upset. Well, actually, he got downright pissed. He formed up an army of 6,500 men, and he marched north to put down the Texas Rebellion. He formed his army by clearing out all the prisons and making all the prisoners into soldiers. The Santa Anna, after losing nearly half his troops to disease or desertion, split his forces, taking 1,500 men to San Antonio, and he sent 2,000 men with General Jose Urrea to Goliad to fix the problem there. After a battle between the Mexican Army and the Texas Army, the Texans were in bad shape. Colonel Portilla sent word to the Presidio asking them to surrender. He said the troops would be taken prisoner and marched to Mexico City. The Texans believed this, and so they laid down their arms. On Palm Sunday, March 17, 1836, 21 days after the fall of the Alamo, Colonel Portilla had 445 Texans marched out of Fort Defiance. They were split into small groups, marched down the road where they were shot. Any survivors were clubbed or knifed to death. Santa Anna thought this would cause the revolutionaries to give up hope. Well, his plan backfired. With the call of "Remember the Alamo, remember Goliad," the Texas Army recruited 900 men, and they were looking for revenge. The massacre at Goliad had the exact opposite effect on the Texas Army. On April 21, 1836, Sam Houston and some 800 Texans defeated Santa Anna's Mexican force of approximately 1,500 men at the Battle of San Jacinto. Today, people visiting the Presidio La Bahia in Goliad, Texas, have reported feelings of sadness or anger for no explainable reason. If you stand there very still and quiet, some people have heard sounds of fighting, rifle shots and cannon fire. Some say they heard what sounded like people running back and forth. All the sounds you'd expect during a battle. Along some of the roads around the mission, the people have heard what sounded like men calling out for help as they lay there dying. We visited the site many years ago, but I didn't hear or see anything. Sometimes you have to just relax and not try to hear things. I think I was expecting an otherworldly experience, and so I came away with nothing. In 1902, the Santa Fe Railroad cut a rail line through the dense thicket between Saratoga and Bragg. The tracks were used for hauling oil from Saratoga oil fields, as well as logs and cattle. The railroad only ran one time each day. This was as much cargo as they had. In 1934, the rail line was closed. The tracks were pulled so they could use them at some other location. Having a nice road cut through the dense woods was not to be wasted. Hunters began using the road as a means to travel through the thick vegetation. Folks needing to travel from Bragg to Saratoga also utilized the abandoned rail line, and this kept the surrounding woods from reclaiming the trail. As folks were traveling this dark road late at night, they would report seeing a mysterious light bobbing about in the distance. As they got closer to the light, it would fade from sight. Soon people began traveling to the road not to get from one town to the next, but to see the light for themselves. The town of Bragg all but vanished from the area, but the road became a landmark. The idea was spread that the light was the ghost of a railroad worker who had been killed by having his head cut off by the train. The light people were seeing was the railroad man looking for his missing head. Each year, people take a drive to Bragg Road so they can see the light for themselves. What could the light possibly be? The naysayers say it's just swamp gas. I don't think so. I've seen a ghost light down by Webb County and Zapata County line. The swamp gas looks more like a cloud. What these people are seeing, they say looks more like a lantern or flashlight. The Bragg Road light stays in the center of the road, as if the ghost were following the old rail line. The swamp gas wouldn't follow the same line each time. Bragg Road isn't the only ghost light out there. The Marfa lights are probably the best-known ghost lights in all of Texas. The people have been seeing the Marfa lights for several hundred years. The lights were called Apache lights at one time when settlers thought they were seeing the campfires from the local Indians. The Marfa lights are so popular that in 2003 they built the Marfa Light Viewing Center on State Road 90 so you can watch the lights in comfort and not get run over by a truck. I know of a lot of artists. They tend to be very open-minded. They don't usually shy away from UFO sightings or cryptids or ghosts. Would you really want to move into an apartment building that used to be a mental hospital? Let's make the place just a little more appealing. Let's have that mental hospital built on top of an old cemetery. And with that in your mind, I'm going to take a brief pause so I can drink some coffee and play a couple commercials. Don't go away. We'll be right back after this. You're listening to Arkanasa Radio. Are you taking care of your skin? Or are you going to wait and see how time treats you? Take care today by contacting Lourdes James, Independent Beauty Consultant, at 956-723-3019. Don't let time get the best of you. Coffee makes the world go round, and around here we have the Organic Man Coffee Trike, 4501 McPherson, Suite number 9. If you're not looking for coffee, try their tea. It's the best in town. And remember, life is too short to drink bad coffee. If you need to squint and hold things out at arm's length to see them, maybe you should get your eyes checked. Del Norte Optical, 107 Calle del Norte, is right across from the Embassy Suites. Stop squinting and start seeing. This is Arkanasa Radio you've been listening to. And welcome back to the show. We were talking about the artists' lofts that have been built in an old mental hospital that was built on top of a cemetery. The Elder Street Artists' Lofts in Houston, Texas, was opened in 2005, and it has 38 units. The idea was to give artists a place to be creative without having to worry about their rent going up. The building they chose to create these artists' lofts in was the Jefferson Davis Hospital, which was built back in 1924, and it was open up until 1938. The Jefferson Davis was a mental hospital. Some of the patients were not there because they wanted to get better. No, these folks were there as in locked up for their own good, or at least the good of the community. People considered to be crazy, let's say, were sent to the hospital to either improve their mental abilities or at least get them out of the public view. Before the hospital was built, the land was being used as a cemetery for Civil War soldiers. When it was still a graveyard, the place was home to over 6,000 Confederate soldiers, as well as hundreds of slaves and the victims of a yellow fever outbreak. The plan to build the hospital met with some stiff resistance by those who didn't want the graveyard disturbed. The city didn't want to incur the expense of moving thousands of bodies, so they designed the hospital's basement mostly above ground. The lowest part of the hospital was less than 5 feet down, so the bodies wouldn't be disturbed. In other words, they just built right on top of a bunch of dead soldiers. Many reports came from graveyards that have been disturbed. This seems to be a surefire way of bringing ghosts out from their final resting place to haunt the area. What part of final resting place don't people seem to understand? So now you've churned up a bunch of ghosts. What better group of people is there to house in this location than folks with a very loose grasp on reality? The patients were seeing things that probably meshed in with some of their other delusions. I can only imagine some of the wild things that went on in the hospital. Mental health treatment was more of a form of torture than medicine. How about this for treatment? They would inject malaria into the patients to give them a fever that just might cause the mental illness to go away. A sterilization was a common practice. This was thought to relieve some of the mental illness as well as a way to keep crazy folks from passing on their mental abnormalities. If a doctor had a pet theory as to how to treat mentally ill, he was pretty much free to give it a try on any 1 or a dozen patients to see what might happen. If he failed to cure them, or maybe he killed a few dozen, it was all okay because nobody really wanted these people around anyway. Today, the artists have a place to live and work, and they get to see some unusual sights. They have reported seeing a few Civil War soldiers, as well as a few slaves walking around the building. This is a different form of muse. The building is open to the public during the daytime. In South Carolina, just south of Siller City, is a wooded area where the devil is supposed to walk at night. In a wooded area is a circle formed from some unknown entity. It's not a very big circle, maybe 30 feet across. The ground is totally devoid of anything. No grass or weeds will grow. Animals refuse to go near the spot. Any dog being led to the circle will dig his feet in. They'll do their best to stay away, and they'll whimper and whine if you try to force them. In the past years, people have taken on the challenge of trying to stay the night inside the circle. So far, nobody has been able to claim the right as being the one and only to manage. Long before the sun comes up, the foolhardy person attempting to spend an entire night in the devil's tromping grounds will have given in to their fears and left. It is said that a few folks have gone insane trying to win this challenge. The middle of the circle has a charred remains of campfires lit by those willing to stay, if not in the circle, then at least right next to it. This is one of those mysterious places that I have no interest in visiting. There are some things I don't want to risk. The legend says the devil walks around this circle as he tries to come up with new and interesting ways of corrupting men's morals and stealing their souls. Even the road leading to the place is called a Devil's Tromping Ground Road. No one has an explanation as to why not even weeds will grow in this circle. If you've been listening to the show for a while, you'll know my wife and I love to go RVing. The best part of any trip is finding a state park with a few hiking trails. I keep promising to not drag my wife on any more death marches. I don't think she believes me. We visit a lot of historic sites, which some have a reputation for spirit activity. In Maryland, there is the Crampton's Gap, Fox's Gap, and Spook Hill. Each of these locations were the scenes of bloody fighting during the Civil War. At Crampton's Gap, the Confederate Army suffered 887 casualties. The Union Army had a total of 533. By Civil War standards, this was a very small battle. Today, visitors to this gap say they can still hear men fighting. They've heard rifles being fired, followed by the sound of men running through the brush. A cannon fire can be heard in the distance. On many occasions, people have seen what at first they thought were Civil War reenactors in the woods, only to discover these were actually the men in battle. The South suffered the greatest number of casualties. They began to retreat, and they found that the number of cannon was slowing them down. It was decided to destroy the field guns. The soldiers were ordered to push the cannon up a hill and over the edge of a cliff. Today, people have found that if you stop your car in the road and turn off the engine, it will begin to roll uphill as if being pushed by the soldiers. I would be leery of trying this in case they decided to push me off a cliff as well. And people have dusted the trunks of their cars with flour, and they find handprints once they're finished. The hill is now known as Spooky Hill. The Union Army was in a hurry to continue the pursuit of their adversaries. Not wishing to take the time to bury the dead, the owner of Fox Gap was paid to take care of the dead soldiers. He got busy digging graves and burying the soldiers. No one knows why, but a large number of the dead were thrown down a well instead of given a proper burial. The people walking by the well say they hear what sounds like large objects, bodies maybe, falling into the well. The spooky-sounding voices have also been reported coming from the well itself. We visit Gatlinburg, Tennessee, just about every year. This town is in a valley in the Smoky Mountains. Pigeon Forge, Sevierville, and Gatlinburg all kind of run together. The scenery is fantastic. You can find just about any kind of activity for your family. We stay in our RV, so we never have to go to restaurants to eat, but if we did, I'd visit the Greenbrier restaurant. The Greenbrier Lodge was built back in the 1930s. Just after it opened, one of the staff was engaged to be married. Lydia was working and living in the lodge. She donned her wedding gown and made her way to the church. Her would-be husband had decided he wasn't ready to be married, and so he failed to show up. Lydia was devastated. She cried all the way back to her room. Sitting there alone in her wedding dress, Lydia threw a rope over a beam and hung herself. Her body was found the next day. Well, her wayward fiancé was found a few days later. He'd been attacked by what looked like a mountain lion. His body was ripped to pieces, but nothing had been eaten. The folks in town all began to speculate the mountain lion had actually been the spirit of Lydia out for revenge. Folks visiting the Greenbrier say they have felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of sadness for no reason. A few have seen a woman in a white dress standing on the staircase where Lydia's body was found. The Greenbrier is said to be the most haunted place in town. In order to avoid having to maneuver the RV through too much traffic, we always stay at the Riverside RV Park in Sevierville. It's a nice campground and the staff are very friendly. The RV park is on Boyd's Creek Highway, which makes it easy to remember since a friend of mine is named Boyd. Just up the road from the RV park is the Wheatlands Plantation. After the Battle of Kings Mountain in 1780, where many of the local men fought and won one of the most decisive battles of the Revolutionary War, John Sevier found himself in a battle with Cherokee, who were in cahoots with the British, who were trying to win the war. At Boyd's Creek, John Sevier led his troops against the enemy and was successful. The dead Cherokee Indians and 2 British soldiers were shoved into a mass pit and buried in what would become the family's backyard. Sevier's leadership caused his followers to insist on his creating the state of Franklin, and Sevier became its governor. The state was never ratified by Congress, and so the state of Franklin rejoined Tennessee. The Seviers owned slaves, and any time one of them would die from either old age or sickness, the body was buried on the property. Soon there were over 69 slaves buried on the family land. The 4 young girls playing in the attic caught the house on fire, and they all died in the blaze. During the Civil War, January 27, 1864, a battle was fought close to the Wheatlands Plantation. 100 Confederate and 65 Union soldiers were killed in the battle. This was known as the Battle of Fair Garden. Over the course of time, there have been 70 murders on the Wheatland property. Why so many? One murder took place inside the plantation. A son got in an argument with his father and killed him. The bloodstains are still visible on the wall and floor where the murder took place. Folks spending time on the property have heard what sounded like Indian chanting coming from the area where the Cherokee were buried. And people say they hear people talking in the fields around the house, even when there's no one there. The sounds of battle have been heard and recorded on many occasions. And people have run into others while visiting the plantation, only to watch as they disappeared. During ghost hunts, the equipment has a tendency to fail more often than not. The theory is the spirits will draw energy from electronic devices, or they'll simply mess with them as a means of communication. In the basement of the plantation is a huge geode that the house was built around. It sticks up from the floor and is about 5 feet across, and it stands about a foot high. This is a very popular site for EVPs to be conducted. What is it about this one piece of land that seems to cause so much death and destruction? I tried to find any information on possible causes, but only came up with theories. Some say that the geode is cursed, or the land was sacred ground to the locals. Whatever the reason, it's a fantastic place to visit if you want to see the countryside, drive into the Smoky Mountains, or spend the day at amusement arcades and rides. Dollywood is just up the road, as well as the Titanic Museum. If you find yourself in Sevierville area and want to visit the plantation, just drive west on Boyd's Creek Highway and look for the signs. And I'm going to take another brief pause here to drink some more coffee, so don't go away. We'll be back after this. You're listening to Arkanasa Radio. Makeup isn't something you want to just smear on and hope for the best. You might come out looking like Lon Chaney. Call Lourdes James, independent beauty consultant, and get a free makeover to see how makeup should be done. 956-723-3019. Back in 1776, someone said, "Give me coffee or give me death." And if that's how you feel, you should be at the Organic Man Coffee Trike. They make coffee the right way, one delicious cup at a time. 4501 McPherson, Suite number 9. Coffee, the stuff dreams are made of. Did you go out UFO hunting and couldn't focus on the sky? Swing on by Del Norte Optical, 107 Calle Del Norte, right across from the Embassy Suites. That's not a weather balloon, that's a flying saucer. You're listening to Strange Things with Chris James. And welcome back to the show. No show about haunted locations would be complete without mentioning Jefferson, Texas. The Texas Bigfoot Conference is held there each year, but the town has a lot more to offer than just Sasquatch. In town, you'll find the Jefferson Hotel. Built in 1851, the hotel has seen its share of sickness and death. As a result, many guests have said sightings of those who died but never moved on. People report hearing whispers that come from empty rooms. They hear someone or something knocking on the walls at night. Faucets have been known to turn themselves on. Children are heard running up and down the hallway at night, even when there are none around. Room 5. A couple's young son kept waking up and telling them that a man in a long coat and high boots kept bothering him and wouldn't go away. Room 19, a woman had her arm grabbed by another woman whose touch was cold as ice. Room 20 is another active room. 2 women staying in the room kept waking throughout the night to the sound of water running in the bathroom. They'd get out of bed and go turn the faucets off, get back into bed only to wake later that night to the sound of water splashing in the sink. One night, a woman was staying with her husband in room 24. She woke early the next morning and went in search of coffee in order to start the day. She stepped out into the hallway and saw a man dressed in old-style cowboy outfit walking down the hall and into a room at the end. This piqued her interest because the man didn't make any sound as he walked by or open or close the door. The woman looked into the room the cowboy had entered. The door was open, but nobody was there. He had simply vanished. A girl was hired to stay a few nights while the owners were out of town. She decided to sleep in room 23 on the downstairs floor so she could be close to the other guests staying in the hotel. She was a bit uneasy being in charge of this huge old place with hardly anybody around. She woke about 3 in the morning to the sound of scraping and banging in the room over her. She knew nobody was supposed to be there, but the sound was unmistakable. Somebody was upstairs. Not being all that brave to begin with, she elected to stay in her room and investigate the possible break-in once the sun was up. Once the sun did come up, she went to see what all the noise had been. The room over hers was empty and nothing in it was amiss. No one had been in there. When the guests came to check out, they asked about all the banging and scraping they'd heard coming from the second floor. They'd heard the same thing the young woman had been listening to. People believe they're hearing the ghost of Mrs. Schluter, the woman who ran the hotel back in the 1890s up until the 1920s. There are lots of photos taken at the hotel of strange mists and nearly human shapes. Just around the corner from the Jefferson Hotel is the Excelsior House Hotel. Built in 1850, this hotel is the home to a few ghosts as well. The original owner was Abe Rothschild of the Rothschild banking family. Back then, Jefferson was the biggest shipping port in Texas, and it drew folks from all over the world. Abe's wife was known as Diamond Bessie. She was always lavishly dressed, and she wore lots of jewelry, mostly diamonds. She had started out in the theater and became one of Jefferson's most talked-about personalities. Abe had a bit of a gambling problem. He liked to gamble, but he wasn't very good at it. He lost far more than he ever won. As his finances dwindled, he turned to his wife for money so he could continue losing. Bessie allowed him to fritter away the entire family fortune. When at long last she was down to just one pair of diamond earrings, she'd said enough. Abe tried to get her last few diamonds so he could play just one more hand. He tried every trick in the book, but she still wouldn't let go of her earrings. After all else failed, Abe lured his wife into the woods, and he returned shortly with her prized earrings, which he promptly lost to cards. Bessie was found dead in the woods the next day. The authorities didn't take long to arrest Abe for her murder. At his trial, Abe was represented by a U.S. Congressman, David Culberson. The trial drug on for 4 years, after which Abe was found guilty and he was sentenced to hang. His lawyer congressman took the case to an appellate court, where a procedural error was found, which led to a second trial. The second trial led to Abe being found not guilty. Abe Rothschild immediately left town and all but vanished from the country. Today, people report seeing Diamond Bessie wandering the halls of the Excelsior. She's easily recognized by her lavish dress and plentiful diamonds. How about taking a stroll along Murder Alley? Back when Jefferson was a dynamic riverboat port, there was just about anything being shipped by boat or rail was to be found. There were people that had no regard for the lives of others. At one time, bodies were being found in this one side road so often it became known as Murder Alley. One record I found said it was a weekly thing for the authorities to discover the remains of a murder victim in this one spot. And people walking along the street have heard moans and groans. On more than one occasion, they have heard screams. Sometimes a feeling of dread hangs over the street. People report a need to look over their shoulder to be sure nobody is sneaking up on them. So what is it that causes some places to hang on to their dead? Some folks say it's a geological thing, something to do with the minerals in the area. Certain kinds of minerals trap the energy as a person passes on and then plays the energy over and over like a tape recorder. Then there's the theory that traumatic events will cause the person's spirit to remain in one place. This wouldn't explain why Teddy Roosevelt's ghost is seen hanging out at the Menger Hotel. Roosevelt died in New York, and the Menger is in San Antonio. Perhaps it's strong emotions, pleasure or pain, hatred or joy. Theaters and jails are common locations of ghostly activity. Hospitals and hotels all have their resident ghosts. Just about every battleground is filled with spirits of those who died fighting for what they believed was a good cause, But then, why is it the fields of Somme or Flanders, both World War I sites of some of the most severe fighting and unheard of death, have hardly any ghost activity? Ghost groups have visited these sites only to find hardly any spirit activity. Ghosts are among some of the strangest things on our planet. Until we get to interview one, hopefully on Strange Things, we might never know what is going on. If you enjoyed tonight's show, check out the archives at strangethings.podomatic.com or on YouTube. You can contact us at strangethings@arcanasa.com or our Facebook page, Strange Things with Chris James. Till next Saturday, I'll see you then.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man, the same murder three? Strange things that happen here, how stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?